This is things I wish I could say in Sunday school. I want to share some thoughts and ideas that are different than what we usually hear. My goal is to be really honest rather than inherently faith-promoting. I hope these ideas may spark some interesting discussions with your friends, families, or classes. Please enjoy. These are the lessons for December 30th through January 5th and January 6th through January 12th. Doctrine and Covenants, Section 1. Today's topics are restoration, the only true and living church, and whether by my own voice or by the voice of my servants, it is the same. This is for 2 weeks of material. The content for the first week is a statement published by the First Presidency in 2020, entitled The Restoration of the Fullness of the Gospel of Jesus Christ. The second week is Doctrine and Covenants, Section 1. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints puts a ton of emphasis on restoration. It's a temple requiem question. It claims to be the same church that Christ organized during his ministry, then lost to the Great Apostasy, then restored by Joseph Smith. These are huge claims. Today I'm going to focus on the New Testament organization. Christ did some organizing, but not much. Christ was focused on teaching people and healing them, not institutional organization. He heavily criticized the religious establishment in his time for their hypocrisy and focus on rules. The Pharisees cared about their power over the people, and they worked to maintain and expand that power. Christ was a threat to their power, hence their constant attacks against him. Religions are organized in order to increase influence and thereby increase power. It's pretty clear that Christ did not care about power. I think that's part of the reason there is very little about organizing a religion during Christ's life. I believe Christ wanted the word spread about his teachings. He sent out disciples to share his gospel. But Christ's focus was on changing people's hearts with their discipleship, not because having disciples brought him power. So what did Christ organize? He called his 12 and his 70. That's about it. We see more structure after Christ in Acts and the epistles, bishops and congregations, replacement apostles, etc. Our sixth article of faith says, we believe in the same organization that existed in the primitive church, namely apostles, prophets, pastors, teachers, evangelists, and so forth. But the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints does not resemble the New Testament Christian religious organization. The world is so different, I really wouldn't expect it to look the same. But the church wants to claim being the same while actually being completely different. I know the main argument of the church is that while the organization is different, what's the same is that Christ is the head of the church. The 12 receive revelation from God, so any differences in the restored church are directed by God. Okay, for argument's sake, let's say that's true. Then what would be the value in trying to claim that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is Christ's church from the New Testament restored? If it's really God's, then it's God's. That was God's church then. This is God's church now. The value in claiming restoration is in its exclusivity. It makes it so it's God's only church, and by definition, all others are not God's. I'll continue this line of thought in a minute, but the other argument for restoration is for priesthood authority, that priesthood is the primary thing that needed to be restored. I said before that I never got the sense reading the New Testament that Christ cared about priesthood or authority. References to priesthood in the New Testament Gospels are tangential, and the word priesthood is never used. We get a reference to keys, and Christ ordains people. That's it. If priesthood authority was so important to God, you think Christ would have mentioned it during his ministry. Instead, he taught people to be kind and loving and showed them how. Again, claiming exclusive priesthood authority from God primarily just reinforces exclusivity. When I think about exclusivity, it doesn't fit with Christ. Christ was inclusive. He invited all to come to him. Exclusivity was much more what the Pharisees did and what Christ criticized. Yes, Christ did only call 12 special disciples. He did not extend that special privilege to all. I think there are logistical reasons why his entourage couldn't be bigger. And if they were taking over things after Christ, you don't want it to be too top-heavy. Now back to the idea of restoration. It's a beautiful idea that there's this older, great thing, and we're going to make it shiny and new and functional again. But was the original really in a condition to be restored? Was there enough value and structural integrity to make restoration a viable option, what's going to be the end result? Not all restorations go well. Some end up ruining the original. A poorly done restoration could end up substantially different from the original. Saying something is restored sounds good. We tend to be deferential, just blindly accepting that a restored thing is of great worth. But we should look at it a lot more closely. I think something that's been restored should get greater scrutiny. The church wants that blind deference. They want people to look for anything in other scriptures to support the restoration claim. And there is plenty of stuff there. The sun, the moon, the stars, baptisms for the dead, spirit prison, etc. Picking out obscure references and then expounding on them gives a strong sense of legitimacy. But taking in the totality, really getting to the essence of Christ, it gives a different picture. I don't like the emphasis on restoration in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It makes me feel like the men in charge want unearned loyalty with that claim, rather than earning loyalty with a strong track record of genuine goodness. Now on to section 1 of the Doctrine and Covenants. The manual calls it a preface. In the chronology, this section was received between section 66 and section 67. When they had decided to publish these writings, this section was written and placed at the beginning. There are two oft-repeated ideas in this section that I want to comment on. The first is in verse 30. I'll read that. And also those to whom these commandments were given might have power to lay the foundation of this church and bring it forth out of obscurity and out of darkness, the only true and living church upon the face of the whole earth, with which I, the Lord, am well pleased, speaking unto the church collectively and not individually. The phrase only true and living church is frequently repeated. I'm going to break it down. First is the word only. I am not a fan of exclusivity claims. It just doesn't feel right with my understanding of loving heavenly parents. Now onto the word true. The basis of the word is real and honest, but I feel like in this context, legitimate is the right sentiment. We're being told that Joseph Smith's church is the only legitimate church. The last word I'm going to mention is living. And this is probably the most interesting part. Living can mean a lot of things. The churchy answer for what living means is that we have a prophet that receives revelation from God to lead the church. Biologically speaking, basic characteristics of life are growth, reproduction, metabolism, and response to environmental changes. It's interesting to think about the institution in this context. Growth is pretty basic. Reproduction is harder to find an institutional analogy. Some thoughts I brainstormed were creating content for the membership, embracing relationships with other institutions, or even breakaway sex. Metabolism is interesting. It's basically converting food to energy. For an institution, that's just taking in resources and utilizing them. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints certainly takes in resources well. Tithing comes to mind first. The church definitely takes it in well, but I would question if it utilizes that resource well. Or maybe the church wouldn't be sitting on a nest egg of over $100 billion. Another resource is the labor and energy of the active members. The church uses the members to do almost everything in the church to keep it running. All the callings, speaking in meetings, teaching, activities, missionary work, cleaning the buildings, etc. I personally think the church asks too much from its members. It stockpiles money instead of using it charitably and asks too much from its members, causing burnout. It would be the easiest thing to balance it a bit better to pay for janitorial services at our church buildings. Ease up on what the church is asking members to do, create jobs, use a tiny bit of the church's ridiculous stockpile of money. Okay, the final characteristic of living things is responding to the environment. I think the church does this, but very poorly. The church responds very slowly to outside pressures. We still discriminate against gay people. We were over a decade late from the civil rights movement before granting Black people full membership. The Gospel Topics essay addressing some common concerns people have with the church came after many years of stonewalling membership and not acknowledging the church's real history. Recently, the church finally officially allowed parents to be present during youth interviews. This is not a good track record of responding to the environment. Okay, so back to a living church. Do you think the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints would fit the definition of living? My answer is maybe, but it certainly doesn't fit only living. There are other churches that respond better to their environment, and probably other churches that metabolize better. How do you feel about Joseph Smith writing a year and a half after he started his church that it is the only true and living church? The next idea I want to discuss is from verse 38. What I, the Lord, have spoken, I have spoken, and I excuse not myself. And though the heavens and the earth pass away, my word shall not pass away, but shall all be fulfilled. Whether by my own voice or by the voice of my servants, it is the same. The last phrase of the verse is well known, and I think it's a problem. It is categorically not the same whether we receive a message from God or whether we receive a message from someone claiming to speak for God. Absolutely not the same. This verse sets us up to be trusting to people who are not inherently trustworthy. There is no caution here about being careful whether someone is actually a servant of God or just claiming to be in order to manipulate you. It also sets some people up to think they are speaking for God because they have a bigger calling. It's messed up. I personally saw missionaries think this, and I've had a bishopric counselor try to pull this on my wife in my presence. It is a gross overstep, complete abuse of power and position. Someone claiming to speak for God is not the same as God speaking. It's just not. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Please share with family and friends. Until next time.